the attacks put Ukraine in a stronger position, because they're no longer essentially negotiating from a point of weakness, and that they've also sent a message to the West as well, that they are still in this fight and that they can actually take on that incredible sort of conventional superiority that Russia has.
The details of Ukraine's mass drone attack on Russia's strategic bomber force are scarcely believable. Somehow the Ukrainians smuggled more than 100 drones near to Russian Air Force bases, thousands of miles from the border. They then launched them remotely in a coordinated attack. It's audacious and brilliant. How effective was it, though? The Times World Affairs editor Catherine Philp is in Kyiv and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate.
Those are the basic details, but it is really an incredible feat the Ukrainians have pulled off, isn't it?
It's absolutely extraordinary. It's being compared in all over sort of Ukrainian social media to in particular the Israeli attack on when they blew up Hezbollah pagers in Lebanon and essentially sort of brought that organization to its knees. And so there's a lot of the sort of comparisons that Ukraine has pulled off something similarly audacious, shall we say.
And what kind of damage has it done to Russian infrastructure and military and defence infrastructure? How big of a hit is this in those terms?
It's a big hit. I mean, what we heard yesterday was that they had hit 41 of these strategic long-range bombers. Now, these are the aircraft that that Russia uses primarily to launch long-range missile attacks on Ukraine. So we were told that they had hit 41 of them. There are only 120 of them, and most of them are no longer in production. We've now had further details this morning from Ukrainian officials that they completely destroyed 13 of them, is what they're saying, and the others were damaged. So, I mean, I think if you just look at that in terms of ratio, that's a fairly incredible figure when you consider that these are not these are not aircraft that can be easily replaced, if at all.
A significant moment potentially, and even more so maybe, Catherine, because there are peace talks that have been suggested today. Do we know if they are going to take place? What details do we know are definitive at the moment?
Well, we know that teams from each side left their home capitals yesterday and arrived in Istanbul, so they are there. There's, as far as we know, the talks are going ahead. It was actually yesterday that we didn't know that Ukraine was going to attend, because the Ukrainian side were angry that Russia had not published its sort of position paper for the opening of negotiations, whereas Ukraine had made that public already and given it to Russia. So all we know still from the Russian side is that they're sticking to this maximalist position, that they have nothing to discuss unless Ukraine firstly stops mobilizing soldiers, and secondly that the West stops supplying it with weapons. So it's hard to see how they get past that. But there's been no direct indication so far that what happened yesterday in terms of those strikes on the strategic bombers, there's no indication yet that those have derailed the talks. And in fact, what is being said on the Ukrainian side is that the attacks put Ukraine in a stronger position, because they're no longer essentially negotiating from a point of weakness, and that they've also sent a message to the West as well, that they are still in this fight and that they can actually take on that incredible sort of conventional superiority that Russia has, because Ukraine has nothing equivalent to those planes, to those bombers, and that missile capacity that Ukraine took out so much of on the Russian side.
Finally, Catherine, I mean, we often see this, especially the talks process, through the prism of where America's support lies currently. In the past, it swung between being seemingly supportive to Russia, now perhaps a little bit more behind Ukraine. We've obviously not had a Donald Trump response to that Ukrainian attack in the last couple of hours. But do we know where his sort of support lies at the moment as we move into those next stage of talks?
Yeah, well, as you say, it's very unpredictable. I mean, recently he's, shown unprecedented frustration and anger towards Vladimir Putin, but he's also, he sort of has an almost congenital dislike of Vladimir Zelensky, which he can't seem to dispense with either. So he does tend to sort of swing between blaming each side. Now, I think it's interesting that what he's been most critical of Putin recently is for launching attacks on the eve of talks, just as Ukraine did yesterday. But the difference being that it's when they have been against civilian targets. So you've seen they've tended to result in imagery of civilians being hit in places like Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine. I think essentially the ingenuity of the Ukrainian attacks on the eve of talks yesterday was that they were such clearly defined military targets that showed essentially that Ukraine was still in this fight.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Catherine. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That is Catherine Philp there in Kyiv with the latest on that Ukraine mass drone attack. And we will keep an eye out to see whether Donald Trump posts anything about it on his Truth Social network. We'll bring you that when we see it.